Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave. We're hoping you'll let us know where you think we got it right and where we totally missed the point, which you can do by visiting unsilentpodcast.com. Now, let's get into it. So, Brian, what should we talk about today?
Well, today, Dave, I think we'll get into maybe the most visually representative symbol of the last 15 years, watching how our values have changed, our priorities have changed, our idea of how we solve problems have changed, and that is homelessness.
Oh, yeah.
It's a stark difference in now 2023 than 20 years ago. It's night and day different. 25 years ago, 30 years ago, it's really different. And the conversation, of course, is so different. We've gone from shaming these people in the 80s, I would guess, like that far back, probably like I would imagine most people would drive by and be like, hey, what's wrong with them? They're homeless. To then some sort of pity, to then some sort of, well, they can't do anything about it, like we need to help them, and then to some sort of, now it's morphed into more of a, well, they're entitled to be here as much as anybody, and who cares what, and we're going to overlook all the things that are happening that are leading here. We're certainly not going to diagnose anything as to what's leading folks down this path, and once they're here, who are we to say what they do? And it's really interesting to just watch how that whole thing has evolved.
Well, and it's even one step beyond that, I think. So we've gone to don't judge them because they're drug addicted to let's put in vending machines with heroin in them so that at least when they shoot up the stuff that we can't stop them from shooting up and killing themselves, at least they'll have clean needles. So we started off with needle exchange programs, and then we ultimately moved to the government providing heroin and other things for people to slowly kill themselves. That, I never thought I would see that.
Yeah, the when I was growing up, it was the War on Drugs, Just Say No campaign.
Right.
To now, I don't know what, 30 years later, 20, 35 years later, whatever, the government literally, like you're saying, providing locations and the appliances and the actual substances in some cases for them to do this thing. And it really, of I guess all the things we talked about probably could be said about, but it really does seem like either the people making the policies want more of this, or they really have not thought through the policies and have any kind of measurable outcomes that they're trying to achieve. Like, it just seems like either they want more or they're indifferent to how the results are, as long as they feel good about what they're doing. Now, again, I don't want to be so jaded and cynical that I'm missing obvious things. Honestly, are there other possibilities? I'm sure there are. What other possibilities are there, Dave, besides those two?
Well, I think, and you mentioned it in the intro, I think one of the possibilities, and this goes straight to this idea of providing needles and providing, clean drug shoot up sites and, this type of thing. I think there's the very real possibility of a big swath of our society saying we give up, we can't solve it, it's unsolvable. I mean, if we think about it, I think it was in Seattle or King County, like in the early 2000s, there was this idea of, I think it was 10 years to solve homelessness. We're going to throw an insane amount of money at it, which they did. And we're going to have like 10 years to solve homelessness. And we're going to have this big effort. It's going to be funded. And then 10 years later, after this was supposed to have been solved, it's much worse. And so there's a certain level that says, I think there's a certain, we're resigned to this. When we get to the point where we're not saying we're going to solve it, but we're going to engage in what's called harm reduction. So not preventing harm, but harm reduction. So that's one of the things that gets bandied about. And, who can object to this idea of harm reduction, right? I mean, we don't want people to be harmed, but if we have the possibility of actually solving it, isn't that better? Wouldn't that be a better solution than just saying we're going to live with it?
Well, and also these nebulous terms like harm reduction sound fantastic.
Yes.
But when you dive in just a degree or two past the surface level, you find out they mean harm reduction to the homeless people. We don't mean harm reduction to the children at the school where the playground is being taken over.
Right.
That we don't mean harm reduction. They just need to like learn how to live with this thing. And
Yeah.
if one or two of them gets hurt along the way, like, well, that's just the cost of doing business nowadays. That is the one of the things where, like, again, going back to either there's no outcomes identified or something like, or they just flat want more of this. And I think that part of it is, I agree with you 100%. This seems like such a huge problem, especially if, as you and I have talked about in previous episodes, and I'm sure we will talk about this a lot because this is a very, very much a through line thought, I think, or concept. If you dive into this topic with any degree of objectivity, you will certainly encounter people who are taking advantage of situations, and you have to
Yes.
start talking about shame again, and you have to start accepting that some people are just do bad things, and some
Yeah.
people don't mind hurting other people, and some people just don't want their lives to, they've given up on life, or they and
Right.
they, or their idea of a good life is whatever they can extract from somebody else. There are people who believe these things.
Right.
And if you scratch beyond the surface level, Gavin Newsom's explanation of homelessness, the face of homelessness is the single mom with 3 kids who lost her job at the factory last week.
Right.
A little bit of objective diving in will show us that persona he described there is considerably less than 5% of the people we're talking about.
Oh yeah, it's not. I mean, the problem that we have, and even the term that we use the term homeless, or we use the term unhoused or unsheltered. Those
Yeah,
terms are not accurate. I mean, yes, there's people living on the street, they don't have a home, but the question you have to ask is, why don't they have a home? Is it because I
right.
was talking to somebody yesterday about this, and somebody I know is in San Francisco right now. And part of the discussion was, the cost of living down here is just so horrendous. I wonder if that's what contributes to this. And what I said is, let's play a thought game. What
Yeah,
the people that you walked past on the street, if we reduced the cost of housing, apartments, etc., by 90% tomorrow, most of the people you encountered on the street, would that immediately translate to them being able to go get a home? No,
right.
because
So
the
let's do the math
majority
real
of it
quick,
is
Dave. What do you, the average cost of a house in San Francisco is probably $1 million. Is that about right?
something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying reduce that by 900,000, so we make the cost of a house 100 grand, and then I'm sorry, just for folks to context who may not know what the cost of housing is in San Francisco.
Right. And then does that is the reduction in the cost of living to 10% of what it is today, does that ultimately solve, or does it make a big impact on the homelessness crisis? And the answer is no, because the people that
Right,
you're walking past on the street are strung out on fentanyl, or strung out on heroin, or strung out on cocaine. They're mentally ill. We have a mental illness and an addiction problem first and foremost. The amount, all the data that we have now, if you get past the euphemisms and get past the activists and all that, the majority of the people that are, and they're suffering. I mean, that's no way to live, in my opinion.
right.
They're suffering. So the majority of people that are suffering like this are suffering this way because of something other than not having a house. Not having a house is a symptom of a much deeper disease. And until we deal very succinctly with this deeper disease, we're not going to solve homelessness. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. There's there's many levels. Again, this is a massive problem, and I don't mean to talk about this in such a way that I think the solutions are simple or
Right.
easy, or uh, I do think that making some progress is simple and easy.
Yes.
Making the better situation in a measurable way better, not worse, I think is simple and easy. Is solving the entire problem? So no, I
No.
suspect this kind of thing has been going on for thousands of years and will be thousands of years after you and I are long gone,
Right.
because it is such a massive thing. There's so many variables. There's so much nuance. Each person's case is different, but there are some generalities. There is a massive drug problem that is only affecting poor people, or people who move away from home and get lost and nobody cares about them. And there is kind of this It's NIMBY kind of thing. As long as it's not my kid, like,
Right.
yeah, it sucks for them. I understand it's really bad, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But I'm going to go about my day, and that's fine, unless you're the person elected to solve these problems.
Right, right. Well, and that then gets to the other point of, so how much of the reason we can't solve this is because we just don't know how and we've given up, and how much of the fact that we can't solve this is due to the fact that we do have billions and billions of dollars, and there is what a lot of people call the homeless industrial complex. We
Yeah,
spend money on very high paid people that are supposed to deal with this issue, and they keep getting their contracts renewed. We keep throwing billions of dollars at it. If we solved it and that went away, who's got the financial incentive to solve it? Unless we get serious about it, and we don't have people that are just in it for the money. And I think, again, I don't want to be too cynical about it, but I think it's very true that there's people that are doing all sorts of odd things that just sort of keep it so it's not completely exploding. Well, maybe they're not doing a good job at that, but they're keeping it at a level that they can continue to get funded. And
yeah,
that's a real shame. That's a real shame.
yeah, for sure. I think that not to bleed into a different topic, but there are these kinds of problems we have because we are financially incentivizing the cure, not the outcome we would like. So, for
That's
example,
right.
I suspect that if I could wave a magic wand and create some system that I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but if I could create some kind of system where medical companies were paid based on how well people were, I suspect the number of prescribed drugs would go down significantly. If
Absolutely.
drug companies were paid on how well people were, I suspect there would be fewer. And the same kind of thing is with mental health. Yes, there are absolutely, I'm sure, counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists and doctors out there who are very much interested in treating somebody a handful of times on a treatment plan and then turning them loose to
Yes.
be better and well enough to move on with their life in a different capacity. And there's a lot of people in those industries whose business plan is we get a client for life who comes and sees us once, twice, three times a week, and that when you scale that becomes an insurmountable expense.
Yes, it's management because you get paid for management. You don't get paid to solve it. But just
Yeah,
and again, not to get too far off topic, but there are clinics in the world that in the United States that do operate by the health model that you pay a
yeah,
subscription to, and their goal is to keep you healthy, not to
right,
treat the disease that comes up. And
yes,
and so if we did have a model like that, and that's how we incentivized, for instance, maybe bonuses for people that are working in this, what we call the homeless industrial complex, and said for all of the people that you take through this arduous process to become sober, to then get some whatever training and counseling that they need, and they get a job. For every one of those, you're going to get $100,000 bonus.
right,
I would guess, and maybe it's oversimplification. I would guess we would have a lot more people that are going through that process and are getting to the point where they're qualifying for those bonuses because they're incentivized to do that. Anything
yes,
that we incentivize with tax money gets done. You get more of it. If you
right,
if you penalize it, so we've done this with sin taxes forever. We did this with cigarettes, right? We started putting
right,
tax upon tax. Cigarette use goes down, 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 down. It doesn't go all the way away, but we disincentivized it with tax dollars. The things we
right,
incentivize with tax dollars, you're going to get more of. And so it's
right,
not a surprise at all to me that when we spent billions of dollars on solving homelessness, we got more of it because we incentivized it.
right. When you incentivize the treatment of the malady that you don't like, you get more of the malady because people find more of the malady than they found before.
Absolutely.
There's no question. So I want to go back to something you said earlier, like, and I kind of concurred with this, which I still do. Like there are these problems, and this certainly qualifies, that are just off the charts huge.
Yes.
I don't believe, though, that outside of things like understanding how the universe was created and things like that, they're just really, really huge scientific things we just don't know yet.
Right.
Systemic process related human behavior types of things. I don't believe these are unsolvable problems. I believe that
Right.
these are not problems that are financially incentivized to be solved. And I don't think that people who are in positions to create policies and laws and actually put these things in place want to have the honest conversations necessary, and which means the reason they don't want that is because the voters don't want to have the honest conversations necessary.
Right.
A politician who tells the truth about, hey, we would have to cut Medicare, or we'd have to do this or that to get our budget in alignment, is not likely to get elected. Like that's
Exactly
just
right.
that's
Exactly
the
right.
fact, right? But there's got to be a way to make progress. Or is it one of those things, like many things like crime and other things, that until this starts affecting wealthy people who get to fund the politicians to make the policies they want, until them and their families and their property and their stuff gets negatively affected bad enough, this is just the way it's going to be? It kind of feels like that to me. And again, I don't want to be too cynical. I don't want to, but I also don't want to be naive and be like, oh yeah, of course we're making progress in this when we're clearly are not. It's clearly worse everywhere you look.
Well, and I think that's true. And until enough people have an aha moment, no, it's not going to get solved. We're just going to keep building gated communities to keep out the bad elements, the crime and the homelessness and the addiction, et cetera. And we're going to keep having our us and them, and they're out there, and we say good things about them. Oh, I hope they get help, but we don't do anything about it.
Yeah.
The other thing I think we got to place into this conversation, though, is the rise in homelessness has come along with the rise in addiction, in people, in the power of our recreational drugs, the acceptance of recreational drugs by our society. You can say that it's, I'm kind of a libertarian when it comes to things like, you do what you
Yeah.
do in your house, and I don't really
Yeah.
care. But on the flip side of that,
That
the
means
rise,
you're a hard right neo-fascist now. I don't know if you know that or not, Dave, but if
I
you're a
must be.
libertarian, you are now like goose stepping from
That's
the
right.
car to the office every morning.
Yeah, that's got to be it. It's well, to believe some people on Facebook, maybe that could be true.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it's
Sorry to
characterized.
interrupt you. I couldn't help myself.
But if we define the problem again back to the majority of it is addiction, and the majority of it is mental illness, and a lot of the mental illness comes from addiction, comes from people messing up their brains with
Yeah.
super powerful addictive drugs, then we have something we can deal with. But the other problem with this is that the question is, how do you deal with it? Well, it's very popular to say we're going to make programs available for people who want to sign up to help treat their addiction. Now, if you're a heroin addict, if you're a coke addict, if you're a meth addict, is the first thing you want to do every day get up and find a program? I mean, some do, but in a lot of those cases, you find that folks are the first thing they're getting up and thinking of, how do I get my next fix? So
Yeah.
what do you do? If that's the majority of the case, then what do you do? Well, it seems to me, again, not to oversimplify, but it seems to me that if we went back to a model that said public drunkenness, whether it's drunkenness from alcohol or it's drunkenness from heroin or pot or anything, is both something to be ashamed of. Bring back the shame factor. That
Yeah.
keeps a lot of people in line. And
Well,
also, we're going to
negatively
pick up.
impacting somebody else for your own pleasure is something that we used to feel shame about that we don't
Right.
now. So it's not specific to
Exactly.
drugs. Again, I can weigh 500 pounds until I want to sit on the airplane seat, and 150 pounds that spills into your seat. Now that's a problem I should care about. So it's not a drug thing. It's a imposing negative
Yeah.
outcomes on somebody else for our benefit or our lack of concern.
Well, and
That's the
imposing
shame
our
part, right?
values. I mean, shame has become, if you shame somebody in modern society, that's one of the new 7 deadly sins. Because
Right.
whatever you choose is it's your choice, and even if it negatively affects society.
But going back to your example of public drunkenness, my point is that it's not the public drunkenness that should be shame about. It's the negative impact that it has on other people for your
Yeah.
own pleasure. Again,
Right.
smoking. I'm very much like smoking is fine until I have to breathe as a non-smoker. Now
Right.
smoking is not okay with me, right?
Right.
Same thing with the
Exactly.
public drunkenness. So my point is like it's the shame is not, because I know people will listen to this and go, well, there you go. You guys think you should have shame if you're addicted. That's not what Dave's saying.
Right. Right.
The shame is the impact negatively on other people, not the
Exactly.
chemical reaction that's happening in your brain.
Right, exactly. And by the time somebody becomes an addict, it's well past the time where they're going to care at that point what you think of them anyway. So it's not, shame is not something, it's not a curative technique by any stretch of the imagination. But it was a boundary that kept a lot of people from trying drugs, from trying things that would help make them lose control. When I was growing up,
Yeah.
that was something like, man, I'll get in trouble. People think I'm a dope head. I don't want to do that, even though somebody says, well, why don't you try this? So I think if we define the problem in terms of what we're doing to ourselves, the rise of acceptance of drug culture, under this idea of do what you want, and as long as you don't impact me, it's not a big deal. At the same time, that's when we saw homelessness increase because more people tried it. You make it, in Washington State right now, and I had mixed feelings about this because, okay, pot, you want to do pot at your house, fine, just don't drive. But the amount of people that have the amount of under the influence car accidents since pot's been legalized has skyrocketed. I mean, obviously that was going to happen because people are going to do it that didn't before. And, then you've got the discussion of gateway drugs and, all that kind of stuff. So I think we have to address the problem like it really is. We've got a mental illness problem, and we shut down all of our mental hospitals, most of them, 40, 50 years ago. We said, we're not going to stick people in mental hospitals anymore. And we're certainly not going to do it against their will. And we said, whatever you want to do, if it feels good, do it, sort of comes out of the counterculture of the 60s. And so we became more and more and more permissive. Somebody told me the other day the war on drugs failed. And I said, no, it seems to me the war on drugs was pretty successful. It's the promotion of any kind of, if it feels good, do it, that's really caused most of our homeless problem right now.
I think the cartels would say the war on drugs was a overwhelming success.
Oh yeah, exactly. Oh, absolutely. Well, and what's an overwhelming success right now is the cartels have a great business model, an evil one, but a great business model because they could just do open air sales in Seattle and San Francisco and Chicago and anywhere.
Yeah. Going back to something you said a couple minutes ago, I think this is an important point to not lose sight of. As human beings, like Tony Robbins is famous for saying that, which Tony Robbins bringing him up in a homelessness conversation doesn't make a lot of sense.
I've heard that before.
Tony Robbins says this. Mary Kay Ash, who founded Mary Kay Cosmetics, said this, and that is, we stay the same until the pain of being the same is greater than the pain of changing.
Right. That's good.
And it's 100% applicable to the homelessness thing. Yeah, everybody recognizes the homelessness sucks, but if I'm still able to make my paycheck and I'm still able to pay for my mortgage, I'm still able to go on my 3 vacations a year, and I'm still able to send my kids wherever, it sucks, but it doesn't suck bad enough to really negatively impact my life. So therefore, why would I change? And so when I talk about this not changing until it affects rich people who fund the politicians who make the policies, I'm being cynical, but also there's a real life human element to this. This is how we're wired. This is how we make decisions.
Yep.
We take the easiest path possible at all times, and that's an efficiency thing. That's an whatever. There's reasons for this, right? So it's if we could find a way to speed that up, though, and incentivize better outcomes, we don't have to wait until we hit rock bottom, pun intended, on the homelessness issue to take on the drug issue. The second thing I think that is missing in the homelessness piece and getting into the addiction element of that. Dave, would you hire a piano teacher to teach your kid how to play the piano who'd never played the piano themselves, but only had read books on how to play the piano?
Right. No, huh?
Of course not. Of course not. So we have this situation with addiction, and I have, more knowledge than I would like to have about addiction and how it works and all that kind of stuff. I'll just say that. You have people who have gone to great schools and have great certifications and accreditations and blah, 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 blah. And they're the experts who are doing the exact opposite of what recovered addicts tell them to do to solve addiction problems.
Sure.
And it's okay. Well, you listen to the expert who has the nice certificate on their wall from Evergreen State College or whatever it is, and you're dismissing the person who actually solved this problem, actually went through the process of getting clean from living on the street, doing the things that we don't want now, and actually can tell you step by step, here's where I'm going to manipulate you as the addict. Here's where I'm going to take advantage of these situations because you have this do-gooder kind of approach that is easily manipulated. And
Right.
here's the loophole. And they don't want to hear any part of that because, again, it gets back to having to hold people accountable, which you do through shame and their positive self-image might be affected, and it's really society's fault and it's systemic. And so we have this kind of combination of we're not willing to have a higher expectation. We're willing to settle with this because it's not really affecting the rich people yet who fund the politicians,
Right.
because the pain of staying the same is not greater than the pain of change. And we've delegated the solving of the problem to people who, in my opinion, frankly, are not they have qualifications at a governmental education, that level, but they don't have boots on the ground qualifications because they've never done this.
Right. And I think that's where it has to become a practical. Anytime you're dealing with, I think, and I work with an organization, on the board of an organization that I'm not authorized to talk about because I'm on the board, but I'm
Yeah.
not the spokesperson anyway, that does drug treatment and is very successful at it, has been for many years. And a lot of the people that get into that, and the people that are actually doing the counseling and the hard work with the addicts are people that are not theoreticians. They're people that, as you're saying, we've been dealing as humanity with addiction. It's part of our culture for thousands, since we
Yeah.
started, right? So it's not
Yeah.
like we're not familiar with this. And if we tap the people that have experience, have come through it successfully, and then we empower them to get in front of those people. This organization that I work in support of, a lot of the patients that are dealt with come because of a court order. They come because a judge said, you
Yeah.
will go to this,
Yeah.
and you will go through this program, and you have a choice.
Right.
You can stay in jail or you can go to this program. Which do you choose?
Right.
Now, if we made that the standard now, in our society, it's like, well, you can't incarcerate somebody for a disease. There's lots of platitudes, and they sound all nice and everything. But when it really comes down to it, a lot of folks, you have to say, you have two choices. You are not going to be drunk on the street. You're not going to be, using heroin on the street. We will not allow that.
Right.
We will help you. We will offer a hand out to you to help you fix this thing, because you are slowly, if we have compassion on the homeless, then we shouldn't let them slowly kill themselves before our eyes. We should go and we can say, you can spend the night in jail, or you can spend a significant amount of time in jail, or you can come here and we're going to help you. We're going to get people that know what you're going through. They're going to help you through this. And we're going to give you every opportunity to refresh and rejuvenate your life and live a meaningful, healthy life. Which do you choose? Now, what do they call it? Tough love? Yes,
Right.
it's tough love. And it's, there's plenty of people that would yell at me for saying this, but I don't see, given what human nature is, another way that's going to work.
Yeah. And again, this is where like nuance and human nature and quite frankly, the significance of the challenge this is for an individual to overcome addiction.
Huge.
It is not something that you just flip a switch and do.
No.
It is not something that's likely to have a high percentage of success with everybody getting one try.
Right.
The vast majority of recovered addicts have failed in recovery multiple times.
You bet.
So there's a balance that has to be struck. And of course, none of us are going to want to do this. We'll have to delegate to some bureaucrat who will screw it up. But there has to be some kind of series of if-then kind of paths.
Yes.
And the first one, like you said, either you go to treatment or you go to jail. Okay. Well, some are going to choose to go to jail because they don't want to go to treatment. Okay. Well, that's fine. You can do that.
It's your choice.
And I'm sure there's drugs available in jail, which might be part of the reason they do that. Some who are going to say, okay, I'll choose the path of going to rehab. Some of them are going to fail with every intention of getting better.
Yes.
There should be and needs to be a path for those folks to find success and to find a path getting clean through a series of if-then kinds of things. Okay, well, if you didn't make it this time, you're going to take a step back. You're going to ankle monitor. What again? I don't have this mapped out perfectly in my head, but there's got to be a way that people who've actually done this can help folks walk them through, and have behavioral scientists and psychologists and psychiatrists craft a plan where people can walk the maze through, and hopefully over 50% come out the other side, or some reasonable metric that is success. Way more than what we're doing now, which is,
Well,
a
yeah.
half of a half of a half of a percent are coming out the other side clean.
Well, and that's it. I mean, if anybody comes to me and says, I have a plan to solve homelessness in 10 years, I'm going to say, I don't believe you, because I don't believe it's possible to go from where we're at to zero in that short a period of time. What we have to do is we have to make progress. It's going to be hard to do. It's going to cost money. I mean, I am generally opposed to government taxes. Okay. Go on the
Yeah.
record. I don't like tax.
Yeah.
I don't like new taxes, but I realize
100%.
in order for us to operate as a society, we have to have money to do that. Governments have to have money to do that.
Yeah.
I am not opposed to increases in taxation to build more homeless treatment centers. We got one mental illness hospital, Western State Hospital in the state. We need lots more. We got a lot of mentally ill people. And, is that going to take some money? Yes, it's going to take some money. So yes, I'll pay more taxes to do that.
They stop paying $600 for toilet seats and use that money.
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying.
That's when we'll talk. That's when we'll do our prevailing wage episode.
So I think we've covered the addiction angle. There's no question that's a significant part of this.
Yeah.
Separate from that, and maybe equal, I don't know the metrics, because I don't trust the math that's being thrown at us, because Gavin Newsom still says that the single mom with 3 kids who was laid off last week is the face of homelessness. So he's not changed the position on that. So I still don't believe the descriptions I see in the math. But there is this piece that we can't overlook, which is the number of mental hospitals from 1945 to 1950 now has gone down something like 97%.
We don't do it anymore.
It's not 97%. It's a huge number. We just don't have them anymore. And this is a situation where two things can be true at once. Yes, we had some probably pretty horrific mental hospitals back then.
Oh, yeah.
I would argue in 80 years, we've made progress on a lot of things, and we probably could make progress on that one too if we stuck with it. But okay. I understand that there were some really bad places that we would not want to have opened up and operated the way they were.
Right.
I'm granting that. So I don't need to be reminded of that. And a percentage of the population is going to be born with mental defects.
That's right.
Whether we like it or not. I don't know if that's 0.7%, if it's 3.2%. I have no idea what the metrics are on that. But I got to figure, if you looked at 1,000-year period, there's probably a trend line or a trend or a certain percentage of people that must be taken care of in a way that their families cannot, or whatever.
You bet.
Where are those people supposed to go? Currently, the choices seem to be jail or the streets.
That's
Am
right.
I missing something there?
Well, I mean, some of them get treatment by their family, but not everybody has a family that can take care of somebody who's suffering from severe mental illness. So that's part of the problem. Is if somebody doesn't conform to our societal standard, we don't have many outlets for them anymore to get that kind of treatment, because and I think a lot of it is because of that stigma. I mean, there's two things really. So it's because of things like lobotomies and shock treatment and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, horrific things.
It's horrific things. And our cultural memory is long enough so that we think of mental hospitals and we think of sort of like medieval torture chambers or something. But, you're right. We have made significant progress technologically in our understanding of the brain and the mind. So that's not a necessity anymore. But if we had an opportunity for folks to be placed, well, and this gets back to not enough mental hospitals, and what they call involuntary commitment laws are such that it's very, very, very difficult to get somebody committed to a mental hospital. Most of these school shootings and other shootings that people do, always afterwards, what do you hear? What do you hear the people around them say? Well, I knew there was just not something right about them. Or the mom called in and said, they're thinking about this. Well, that's a mental illness that they've got, and there was not an opportunity for one reason or another to get them off of the streets and into some place where they didn't write a manifesto and shoot up a bunch of kids. So if we got to connect all these things together. People are upset about school shootings. They should be. We should be upset about the amount of gun violence. We should be. Absolutely true. But we ignore what the causation of these things. We ignore where it starts. The germ of these things start in somebody who's not thinking correctly, or maybe they've gone through
Right.
abuse and got they have mental illness because of abuse. We need medical and psychological treatment centers we need easier paths to get people into those things, even if they don't want to. And that's
Yeah. And
dicey. I know.
this this is the flip side of the shame thing. It used to be that if you had a family member who had an affliction like this and you didn't take care of them, you would feel shame for abandoning your family.
Yes,
And now
exactly.
that shame's out the window,
Right.
like now your own sibling or your aunt or your parent or your child, if they have this affliction, that's now somebody else's problem because
Right.
there's no stigma in just kind of abandoning your family. Now, again, I don't know. I'm not saying that that's most of these situations. I don't know what the math is on how many there are. I don't know anybody who has a person with a mental affliction that they're taking care of. I know people who take care of old people for sure.
Oh yeah.
And there's great programs out there to pay family members to take care of elderly people.
You bet.
You could do a very similar thing where you wouldn't have to have a mental hospital. You could pay Pam to stay home and take care of her brother
Right.
and be a caregiver with like the things like the Cokes program that they do for senior citizens and things like that. Again, I go back to like these seem like solvable problems to me. So
Yes.
Dave, help me and the people who are paying the price for not solving these problems, as much as people rail about how we've made so much progress, the people who pay the price are still women and children.
That's right. Yes, absolutely.
We can go back through history and the reason armies have been created through history is to protect women and children.
Yep.
The reason armies have been created throughout history is to go hurt and steal and do things to women and children.
Yep. Absolutely. Sure.
Like, so as much as we think we've evolved and we've changed and blah, 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 we are letting people run the streets, fair or not fair, right or wrong, whatever. The outcomes are children are less safe, women are less safe. Most men can walk down the street in San Francisco, and if somebody does something to them, they can at least push them away, they can get away, whatever.
Right.
Children are going to be hurt because they're homeless are taking over the schools, and women are going to be hurt because they can find themselves in situations that they're really outmuscled, outnumbered, like whatever. To the best of your ability, Dave, explain to me what is the logic from people who say this is okay, we should, if we have more of this, it's just all right. What is the argument where the outcome that they're pursuing is so great that it's worth putting these people, again, often women and children, even though we've evolved so much,
Right.
we're putting them at risk. What's the argument that I'm missing here?
Well, I think what happens is people will. I mean, if you take the public as a consideration, the healthy people as a consideration, I think the philosophical logic behind it is we have to consider first and foremost the homeless person, the mentally ill person, the drug addicted person before we consider anybody else. And so therefore we're not going to really talk about, well, they shouldn't walk downtown. I mean, yeah, we're allowing that homeless camp to be next to that grade school, but the teachers will protect them. There's basically a
Literally in the
discounting.
playground in some places. The playgrounds for elementary schools have been taken over as homeless encampments.
Yeah. Well, and see, again, I don't think it's that somebody thinks, well, here's the relative impact on these people in these places, the rest of the public, the quote unquote normal public. I don't think it's that people think, well, maybe hopefully we won't be impacted. I think they just discount them almost entirely. Say, well, they're the healthy people.
Discount who?
We discount their needs. In other words, we think we have to focus all of our attention on this homeless person, on what they're saying they need, on what they're wanting to do. You can't make being unhoused a crime. You can't make being drug addicted a crime, et cetera. So all of the attention is focused on the freedom and the rights and the compassion. There's a book written a number of years ago by Marvin Olasky, The Tragedy of American Compassion, and the idea behind it is that we are so compassionate as a society. We can become compassionate to a fault. In other words, our compassion has been misplaced. It's gone too far. Not that we should be uncompassionate, not that we should be cruel,
Right.
but that we should have boundaries. If you have no boundaries, say, if you go beyond this boundary, that is where my compassion stops. Well, it doesn't really stop, but that's where my action becomes more firm. And it's not going to be solely informed by compassion. It's going to be informed by compassion for you, but compassion also for society, for women and children, and the people who are just trying to go about living their lives.
The people who are being harmed, I like the videos I've seen are they're old ladies, especially old Asian ladies, like
Oh,
who
yeah.
just get like shoved downstairs. They're like 80-something-year-old women
Yeah.
who are just like stabbed and punched and tackled and kicked and and what I'm trying to wrap my head around is who is the villain in the story that's being told that is so bad that these people are just collateral damage that happens no different than in 1492 when you would have a war and you would shoot, your archers would shoot, and sometimes you shoot your own guys and you're like, it really sucks, but that's the price we pay for winning the war. Who's the villain here, Dave? Who's the villain that's so evil that these old ladies and women and children are there? The harm to them is being discounted or minimized because if we get the villain, it's worth it. What's the villain?
Well, I mean, I think we're told that the villain are the privileged people. Well, we can't really consider what, your care for your mom or your sister or your kid as much, because we have to consider first and foremost the less fortunate, the less privileged. This is where, again, back to the compassion idea, this is where
Why
compassion
do we have to?
overwhelms.
So let's try this to the best of your ability. Why do we have to consider their needs so highly at this point?
Because society has treated them so poorly, because they haven't gotten the benefits that you and I have. They don't have money,
Why have they not got the benefits that you and I have to the best of
because
your ability, Dave? What do you think?
society is fundamentally unfair. It's fundamentally bigoted. It's fundamentally capitalistic. It allows certain people to prosper while other people.
Yeah.
It's unfair. It's just unfair.
Okay. So again, try not to be too cynical and trying to be objective, and I really mean that. I'm not just saying that as a platitude. I really do mean that.
Yeah.
It seems like the solution though is creating unfairness, is creating a tilted scale of who could be successful and who can't. The people who live in certain areas where this happens a lot, those children are going to have less, they're going to have worse test scores, I would imagine, because
Yes.
it's a hassle getting to school.
Stressful.
The stressful, and just like if you're worried about getting stabbed on the way to school, you're probably going to perform less well on the test, I would guess. I don't know.
Imagine.
I don't know the math on that, but I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
Also, the women who live in those areas probably are going to be not able to walk to community college and do things to better their life, whatever that might look like for them, or whatever. So it seems like the solution, in reality, is the same outcome as the outcome we're saying that we want to beat, which is a set of rules where some people have privileges and some people have oppression. And solving that, we're creating oppression and privileges. Am I missing anything here?
That's a very good point. Basically, what we're doing is, in the name of fairness, we're distributing the pain. We're distributing the pain from those that have experienced it, are experiencing it because of life's. I don't think anybody starts off as a teenager or as a kid say, I want to be homeless, I want to be a drunk, I want to be addicted to meth. I don't think anybody starts off like that. Things have happened in their lives that have been bad and have caused them to fall into the situation. What we want to do, rather than to just strictly lift them out of that situation, it seems that the philosophy is we want to distribute that pain across those who have not fallen into that situation, who have not, become addicted to something, who have not gone through the pain that other people have through their, and, let's stipulate up front, or, well, it's not up front, it's, 45 minutes in, but let's stipulate that these folks, I don't believe they've had bad life circumstances, and bad life circumstances do happen. Things that happen in the universe oftentimes are definitely not fair. They're not just. Things that happen to people that shouldn't happen to people. That is absolutely true. We can recognize that, but if we say that is true, and as a result of that, somebody has gotten into homelessness or mental illness or whatever it happens to be, drug addiction, whatever. If we say we're going to concentrate on the fairness aspect of it rather than we're going to concentrate on the curative, on the improvement, on the reduction of harm, if you want to put it that way, aspect of it.
Yeah.
Then I think we're making a better long-term choice, but it doesn't feel as compassionate, because if you're going to help people to get better, you have to have boundaries, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
have to have some boundaries, and boundaries are oftentimes not as fair, perhaps, or not as compassionate.
Well, it feels, and I've not really thought through this, so I'm really counting on you to catch me if I'm saying something that doesn't make sense here. If I'm oversimplifying this, please tell me. But it feels to me like we are reallocating oppression and privilege just with a new set of values than we had. Like, we hate the old set of values, like we hate the values that were established in 1948 or 1946 or in Christianity or what. We hate those values. Okay, we have a new set of values we really want to we want to put in place. And based on those new values, now we will decide who gets to be oppressed and who gets to be privileged. Is that too much of an oversimplification?
Well, I think that's what it ultimately comes down to. I think that's the outcome that we end up with. So I don't think it's necessary. I don't know if it's intentional, but I think that's the outcome that you end up having.
Yeah. To be clear, I don't think it's intentional. I just think that's what's happening.
Yes, that's the outcome that we have as a result of compassion that has been misplaced, or it's gone too far. Now, I mean, we have to. I mean, my faith teaches me that I got to love my neighbor, and I have to, if there's somebody to help you, got to help you. You got to do everything you can to
Yes.
be compassionate to people. But oftentimes the most compassionate thing to do is not to provide them the needle, but to provide them a ride that they must take to the mental institution, to wherever it is. That's when we become not just a compassionate society, but a wisely compassionate society. And that's what
Yeah.
I think we're
Well,
missing.
yeah. You could, to like super simplify things, like you could be compassionate of somebody and like, they need to dig a hole. Okay, I'll get you a shovel. I'll get you the tarp. I'll get you the tools you need, but you got to dig the hole.
Right,
Right?
right,
There's
right,
certain things I can't do for you. Getting clean and sober is something that cannot be done for a
right,
person.
right.
And that is a truth that we have to recognize. And I think by and large people probably have. It just seems like either, again, not to talk in circles. It and the compassion angle I think does make sense, but there has to be the accountability part. There has to be
That's
a
right.
part where we say, this has gone, yes, we empathize. And I'm sorry life happened to you this way. And I'm sorry that you found this Oxycontin and whatever. And I hope to God that the people who put that in place, the billions that they paid in fines, that money goes to help people like you.
Right.
And it sucks that this hardship happened and you lost your child or whatever it is, you lost your job and it spun you out. And you got to get better.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, that's the one piece that's missing. If we have compassion, but without action to help the situation improve, and sometimes help the situation improve even despite the resistance of the person we're trying to help. I mean, if you think about a person drowning, and lifeguards are trained, they go out and they're swimming out, and somebody's thrashing about, they resist. Sometimes they resist the lifeguard because they're just thrashing
Right.
about. The lifeguard
Yeah.
has to forcefully take them,
Yes.
forcefully, and restrict them, prevent them from thrashing about, and bring them back to shore. That's compassionate. It may not be respecting their free will to thrash about, but it saves their
Right.
life. And isn't it more compassionate to help somebody save their life, to go through the hard work of recovery, to go through the hard work of, if for the small percentage that are economically, for the Gavin Newsom's one, people for this, and that's a small percentage that are economically homeless. People
Yes.
usually become homeless because of other circumstances, not because of economics.
Right.
And yes, I realize house prices are too high, but for the small percentage of people that are economically homeless, helping them get retraining as a result of that, that's the compassionate thing to do. But you can't go to work for them.
Yeah. Well, I would argue places like Seattle and San Francisco, where the price of housing is too high, they could revise some of their building codes that would dramatically lower the cost of housing if they really were serious about that. But that's a whole different topic. We
Spoken
won't
as
get
a
into that.
contractor guy.
Yeah, yes. The city of Seattle, I think their building code is 700 pages. It's the biggest one in the entire country. And then but again, they cry about how the housing is too expensive. Meanwhile,
Right.
the codes that they have in place do not allow it's stuff that would make housing way cheaper. Anyhow, I don't want to get sidetracked with that. I I do think that there's got to be somebody who has a plan. And do you think if somebody did pipe up with a plan and say we can solve this problem, and I honestly do think we could solve it in 10 years. Not I don't mean like have zero
Yeah.
homeless
Yeah.
people, but get back to 1994 levels. I think
Sure.
we could do that in 10
Sure.
years. If a person like that who came up with a plan, do you think that person would get any traction?
No, see, and Brian, there have been people that have done that. There's been organizations that have run projects across in various places in the country, and I've read a number of them where they've actually done projects that have gotten people not to just maintain their homeless state, but have gotten them out of it, that have helped them with all the different things that go into that, and because they don't follow for instance, there's been a great, not to get too far in the details, but there's been a basically a philosophy that's called housing first. And this is why in housing first scenarios, to get a lot of this funding, if you had restrictions like, well, you can't get drunk in the housing that we provide. Well, that doesn't get funded because it doesn't follow the housing first kind of scenario. The housing first philosophy is first you give them a place to live with no restrictions. No, this is why when King County, when they're buying all these hotels and motels and all of this, why they're trashing them. They have to shut them down. It's been a dismal disaster because what works. We do have a lot of examples. We know a lot of things that do work. But if it doesn't follow the current government guidelines, because it's based on a certain philosophical perspective, then they don't move forward. I've just seen tons of these at the end of. You probably saw the Seattle is Dying.
Yes.
At the end of that, I don't remember the details, but I can recommend this to people. At the end of that, there were examples of places. I think there was one of them in Boston that had a great track record with this, and so there are examples of things that do work.
Boston.
And so there are examples, but if the entrenched systems, and this is why earlier I was railing against the homeless industrial complex, because if the entrenched systems suck up all the money for this, and they won't do something that is demonstrated to be a positive benefit and to help people, then we're not going to get it solved.
Yeah. I'm going to throw a curveball at you, and people are going to think I'm a religious zealot when I say this, probably because I've talked about how I think part of what over the last few episodes, part of what we're dealing with is just people rebelling against traditional Judeo-Christian values.
Sure.
And I'm not I don't have a theological background, but I've enjoyed the benefits that have come from living in a society with traditional Judeo-Christian values. So I'm all for them. But I wonder, I'm going to throw a curveball at you here. So I just Googled the 12 steps of AA.
Yeah.
Do you know what you've heard of the 12
Yes.
steps? You know what they are. So step one is what do you?
I don't remember. I don't remember the steps.
Okay,
I remember
step one is you admitted you had a problem, basically. Like, that's for. Step two is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity.
Yeah.
I wonder if one of the reasons that there would be I agree that if somebody came along and said they had a solution, I don't think that person would get any traction.
Right.
I don't. In my gut, I don't believe the Gavin Newsoms of the world, the mayor of whatever city that's dealing with this in San Francisco.
Yeah.
I don't believe they want a solution. I think one of the reasons that they would push back on a solution is because the best known programs to get people clean and sober are 12-step programs.
You bet. Absolutely.
Step two is coming to believe in a power greater than ourselves. They used to call it God back in 1934 when the book, when the 12 steps were created or whatever. They don't call it God anymore. They say a power greater than themselves.
Right.
But that is antithetical, or it's the opposite of what everyone these people in power are pushing for. Well, do you think there's an element of that, or do you think I'm just stretching way too far?
No, 100%. I mean, first of all, I think one of the reasons that AA and other programs like it have been successful is because they follow this pattern. I mean, the 12-step program is a successful pattern. It's not a cure-all. It's not a magic,
No.
but it is it's a
And
successful program.
it's a wild success, and it has something
Yes.
like a 33% success rate. It's
Yeah, well, and that's wildly successful in that space.
yeah,
So, but I think the reason that there's pushback against that ends up being because if you want to be, as a government official, if you think that God is government is G, then you can't
yeah,
you will have, one of the first of the 10 commandments, you're not going to have any other gods before me. Well, government
yeah,
believes that same thing, except it's you're not going to have any other gods before me. Government,
yeah.
small g.
I had not really thought of this until you just were talking about something a minute ago. I was like, I wonder if there's an element of that. Like if
I'm sure.
I mean, one of the worst things the government could ask for right now is for somebody to come in and believe something that more powerful than them.
Oh yeah, it's
I,
competition. It's competition for power.
I've never really thought through this before this moment. So I don't, a couple of these things that we're talking about, I've not fully thought through. They're just kind of coming to me. So forgive me for not having well thought out ideas here, but anyhow, so we've covered the addiction part. We've covered the mental health part. The last piece is that we'll kind of segue into something we'll talk about in the future, I'm sure, is this problem is growing leaps and bounds because of the immigration, and it just feels like this thing is gaining speed in
Yeah.
2023. It's gaining momentum, not losing it. Does it feel like that to you as well?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think there's the immigration issue because we've got more fentanyl coming into this country than is necessary to kill 3 times the number of people we have in this country. And I think the other
Yeah,
part of that is and the reason that and drug addiction has become, fentanyl deaths are the number one cause of death between people 18 to 45 years old in this country. Number one, fentanyl.
yeah,
So part
yeah,
of the problem is our technology is killing us. Whether you talk about all the different types of drugs that we have today, and this is part of the drug piece, and I realize that's not the whole thing, but they're so much more potent today than they were in the 80s or the 60s, or
yeah,
even pot. It's
yeah.
tremendously more
It's not
potent.
even, yeah. Pot's something like, I don't know, that it's 20 times. It's a
Yeah,
lot for
it's a
sure.
completely different
Might be
thing.
70 times. It's completely different. So before you run out of time, Dave, do you also think that the people who are going through this affliction, so we have the women and children as collateral damage, but we also have the people who are actually dying of this stuff, the
Yes.
100,000 people a year who are dying from fentanyl, the who knows how many are dying from stabbings and the homeless encampments and explosions and fires and the plague I heard was coming back in one
Oh
of
yeah,
them in
yeah,
San
yeah.
Francisco, Seattle, or something,
Bubonic plague.
like
Yes.
literally the Black Death.
Yep.
Like, um, do you feel like the people who are allowing this or even kind of nudging this along, however you want to look at it, these folks are also just collateral damage, and the villain, the patriarchal, unfair society is so bad that these people have to go through this affliction. That's just the cost of winning the war.
No,
Is it that
no.
cynical? Do you think?
I think that I think it really comes back to the two things we've talked about earlier. I think it comes back to a government that's not going to let a crisis go to waste. Politicians are not going to let a crisis go to waste. It's going to come back
Yeah,
to a society that doesn't take this seriously enough. I mean, we complain about it, we see about it, but we don't do anything
yeah,
about it. I mean, I think anybody who's concerned about it that's part of our whatever our audience is, they ought to do something about it. I mean,
yeah,
join a board. I learned more about this by joining a board that
yeah,
deals with this on a day in and day out basis than you could possibly gain from the news. So I think it's
yeah.
all of those things. I think it's apathy.
Ask a friend of yours that has recovered from this what it's really like, and I promise you, they
Yeah,
will tell you they would not wish this on their worst enemy.
right,
They would not. They would. I asked a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine, I, who I know has gone through this, and I said, "Help me understand the business model for the cartel. They're fentanyl kills people. It has a
right.
very high death rate.
Yep.
What's the business model here? I don't get it. Like,
Yes.
killing your
No
clients doesn't
repeat
make sense to me." He
customers.
says, "You don't understand. An addict hears about a drug so powerful killed somebody, they don't run from it. They can't wait to try it."
Right.
And I'm like, oh my goodness, like there's stuff like that you'll learn from talking to somebody
Yeah.
who has been through this. Dave, we're out of time. I think you hit on a really great point there right at the very end. We're gonna have to expand on that some more. Is this not the government not letting a crisis go to waste? And kind of like we're incentivizing the sale of medications to cure illness instead of incentivizing wellness.
Right.
I think you're onto something there. We are incentivizing a government who promotes, allows, creates, sustains crises because fear sells and fear drives us to action.
That's right.
Rather than happiness and satisfaction and things like that. I think that's something
Exactly.
we'll have to come back and talk about. Those of you listening, please, as we've mentioned before, tell us where you think we got it right. Tell us where you think we completely missed it. You can do that. Go to unsilentpodcast.com. You'll have links to all of our social channels there, but you can also find us on YouTube and Rumble. That's where you can see the videos if you like video better than audio only. And great forum there to put your comments and please tell us where we got it right. Tell us where we got it wrong. We want to be 100% genuine, honest, objective, and sincere about this. We do not want this to be just two dudes in their little echo chamber telling each other how smart they are. We want to find out what we really are missing in this conversation because these are important topics. So that's it for this time. Until next time, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.